One of the things that got me where I just couldn't let HRV go is every app out there was for elite athletes. Whoop's a great example. There's a lot of carryover, but the language around some of the apps weren't appropriate for mental health setting that I wanted to use it in. We saw 3-day significant drops in HRV. There were 2 studies, one showing that could predict self-harm or suicide attempts, the other showing that it could predict relapse. And I was like, if we could get that data to a professional, a 15-minute phone call might be the difference between a relapse and continued sobriety.
Matt Bennett, welcome to the podcast. I would love it if we'd start with what's the journey that you've been on that's brought you to where you are today?
Well, it probably starts out in a place for somebody who's into heart rate variability, performance, and can show up on a podcast like yours where you've had many guests of high performers on the show. Is I actually started out in mental health. My initial background was I was a therapist working with youth and families experiencing a range of social problems, criminal justice involvement, homelessness, addiction, those sort of things. And, came across about 2001, the Adverse Childhood Experience Study. If your listeners aren't familiar, it was a huge study done in San Diego, California, that really started the trauma-informed movement and understanding the impact of trauma on someone's nervous system and their psychology and their behavior and their longevity. And, when I was a therapist, I always, what's the why behind the behavior? And that's a very complex question with a lot of answers to it. But like, hey, we address some of those social or financial issues, but yet the behavioral issues kept happening. My job felt like a game of whack-a-mole. We might address one issue, but another issue always popped up. So when I learned about trauma, I realized this is a big why behind the struggles of the folks that I work with. So I got really excited about that. When I get excited about something, I don't shut up about it. So my excitement turned into me talking about it with everybody that would listen to me. And eventually people paid for me to talk about it and then bought books that I wrote about it. And so it was this, 20-some year journey to really trying to integrate this idea of nervous system health, whether that's polyvagal theory and autonomic nervous system. I'm a big brain nerd as well, into helping people heal from trauma. And that, got me looking for how do we measure our effectiveness? I've always been big, especially when I got trained in psychology, we were just starting to really pay attention to what we were doing working. Which sounds weird because you would hope if you go to a therapist in the 80s, you knew you were getting something that worked. We didn't really have great metrics for that. So I kind of grew up professionally during the quality movement in psychology. And one of the things that really frustrated me is I was learning about all these nervous system dysregulations, right? Whether that was trauma, addiction, chronic stress. I got a master's in business administration along the way. So I always pay attention to leadership and organizational burnout. Those sort of factors dysregulate the nervous system and hinder performance, mental health, physical health, social health, and cognitive health as well. And so I was always frustrated with trauma because we knew there was this beautiful thing called post-traumatic growth. Whereas if we give people the right mix of resources and support, that trauma heals in I think almost magical way, even though there's a lot of science behind it, is like if you break your arm and you go get healthcare, you're pretty happy with the services you get, that if you're back to normal functioning within, 3 to 6 months without pain, right? That's how we usually think of healing. But with trauma, and if any of your listeners have been through a hard time in their own life, I know I can look back at my past trauma and say, I never want to go back there again, but I'm stronger today for having gone through that experience. And to me, that's the best definition of post-traumatic growth. But how did we know our services, our interventions were helping to promote psychological, social, nervous system health. And there was no way except putting somebody in a functional MRI, which was never in my budget to do on a regular basis. There's no way to do that. So that's how I learned first about heart rate variability as a very powerful biometric to measure healing, growth, performance, general health, and a range of other features. So I'll kind of stop my journey there because I probably want to pick it up. But that was my introduction to heart rate variability and got me very, very interested in the topic.
Amazing, fascinating. And I would imagine most of my listeners will probably have an idea, but let's just start with the basics. What is HRV?
So it's small, and we're talking millisecond variations between heartbeats. And the thing to get out of the way first is the higher the heart rate variability, the better. So heart rate, oftentimes, especially with your peak performers, the lower the resting heart rate, the better. You can just do some simple math. If there's less beats per minute, there's more room for variation. So you can connect the sciences in that way. But you could have a low resting heart rate and very little variation between heartbeats. So it takes, what we know about heart rate and resting heart rate and really gives us a ton more information, because as organic, entities, really what we need is flexibility. Whereas if you think about like your computer, you want your computer to operate just like it did the day before, the day before, the day before. So in a mechanical world, consistency is key. In organic beings, flexibility is key. So very simply, we can think about that variation. Again, we're talking millisecond variation between heartbeats is a sign of nervous system flexibility, the ability to adapt, change, maintain homeostasis, meet the challenges in front of us while staying emotionally and socially regulated while we do it.
And how do we know that is the case for HRV?
You measure it. It's a simple thing, and where you don't have to go to a laboratory to measure it anymore. So that was the exciting thing that got me about HRV is we can measure this. You can measure it every minute of the day if you really have a lot of free time, but we can strategically measure this and bring, the science of HRV starts back in the 1960s, even though, I think it was the Greeks, ancient Greeks who discovered the variation to begin with, and the vagus nerve and all these other aspects. But really we've got, all this science to back it up as a really indicator of, I always like to say, of physical health, mental health, cognitive functioning, and social health as well.
Just why wouldn't we focus on just resting heart rate?
You can. So that gives you, a good metric. You just don't get the thousands of articles and science behind the variation between that, because you're not getting that autonomic flexibility, that autonomic health when you just look at heart rate. So I'm not saying, blood pressure gives you something, glucose gives you something, heart rate gives you something. Heart rate variability gives you something else, and I would argue something more than just simple heart rate. I'm not saying we throw that out. It is a good biometric to use. Heart rate variability, we just know, gives you such a better metric for overall health and wellness. Your ability to handle or recover from stress. It's just a better metric when we're measuring overall health and wellness. Doesn't mean we need to throw out anything we know about heart rate, resting heart rate. Bring that in too. That can come to the party. Just if we stop there, we miss a lot of really powerful research and science when we take that metric and get more sensitive with it.
And what exactly is going on there in the body with that variance? Because in any other metric, as you've alluded to before, the idea of something being irregular
Yeah.
would signal the opposite, wouldn't it? So,
Yeah.
what is it about that irregularity or variance that
Yeah.
gives that is what's actually going on there?
Yep. So again, flexibility being good within an organic species, but listen to some of your podcasts. I think your listeners would be okay with me nerding out just a little bit on their autonomic nervous system. So we got to dig in a little bit to the parasympathetic nervous system. Now, oftentimes we label it like rest and digest, which is grossly oversimplifying what this system does for us. It's just like calling the sympathetic the fight or flight response. It's like, yeah, but what it does so much more, including keeping you alive on a day-to-day, second-to-second basis. So the parasympathetic, Stephen Porges talked about polyvagal theory. So we have this vagus nerve, which when we talk about heart rate variability is kind of the star of the show. So the vagus nerve, Vegas is, again, I think this is Greek, the wanderer. And if you look at where the vagus nerve goes throughout the body, it is all over the place. Just a sidetrack. I find it really fascinating that if you take the vagus nerve and put it over like an ancient chart of the chi flows, very, very similar. It's really cool. Like we kind of knew this with our ancient kind of sciences, Chinese medicine, the yoga traditions. We're on kind of the right track with some of this, but we see this nerve go all throughout our body. And so
is that like the sorry to interrupt, is that like those chakra things you see? Is that what you're alluding to?
Chakras are very meta level.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say, but if you look at like if your listeners would like go on Google Images and do a chi chart or a Chinese energy medicine chart, they have these what do they call them, channels throughout the body.
Yeah.
And they almost match like the vagus nerve 1-to-1. So it's just, I think we've known that this has been an important thing for a long time. So the vagus is really what creates the variability. So without the vagal nerve, we call this the vagal brake. Our heartbeat would be about 120-ish beats per minute. Mm-hmm. So I would say, for your athletes out there, run a 100-yard dash as fast as you can. Probably by the end of that dash, you would be in the state, your sympathetic state, right? So heart rate would be up high, you'd be breathing hard, your heart would be pounding in your chest, you would be in that state. Now imagine walking around in that state for your entire day, sitting in meetings in that state, trying to raise children in that state, trying to cook dinner in that state. It would be driving in that state would be dangerous or just absolutely annoying. So that's our sympathetic, and our sympathetic is always there. So if you need fight or flight, you often don't get a lot of warning that car is swerving over to your lane in traffic. So that brake removes, and then you get that 120 heartbeats per minute so you can react immediately. So the sympathetic is always there. Now, every time we exhale, again, called a respiratory sinus arrhythmia, that ventral brake slows the heart rate down. So when we inhale, the brake gets taken off. We get that sympathetic energy. And then when we exhale, that brake goes down. So we see this fluctuation in heart rate with every inhale and exhale. So while I'm going to summarize a lot of complexity in the science that we could literally unpack for the next 6 weeks, is very, very simplified that sympathetic really gives you the energy you need to perform in your life. Now, if you're doing one of those killer workouts I've heard you talk about in the podcast, you don't want to be necessarily relaxed and chilled out. You want to go and push yourself to that limit to get that gain from your recovery that will happen after your workout. So the sympathetic is going to give you that energy, whether that's for a big presentation at work, whether that's to have the energy you need to be the best parent you want to be. But then when that exhale comes on with that ventral vagal brake, that's where we get nervous system regulation. Again, very simple way to look at it, but it really allows us to bring that prefrontal cortex executive functioning, which again, cognitive functioning, emotional regulation, social connection into our present moment. So this dance that our heart rate does, really the more variation usually means we've got good emotional regulation because that ventral vagal brake is strong, but we also have that good sympathetic energy to bring to our day as well. So energy regulation, that's in many ways what we're measuring with heart rate variability.
If you're anything like me, you're probably good at starting habits, but fail to stick to them over the long term. There's probably one or two, whether that be going to the gym or taking the dog for a walk, but struggle to maintain others around career, relationship, or life goals. If you're a long-term listener of the podcast, this won't be the first time you've heard me talk about habits and leveraging public accountability. That's why I created Indiip, the tool that helps you build healthy habits and stick to them. After creating your free account, you'll be given your own personal public profile link, which you can share with your friends, your family, coach, or followers. And when someone clicks that link, you'll be given a real-time notification that someone is watching your habits. I can't tell you how much of a motivator it is when you're stuck in a procrastination cycle and this little eyeball pops up with a number next to it. My productivity has gone through the roof since I started using it. It's that effective. Luckily for you, I'm giving away 100 free VIP months to my podcast listeners. There's no credit card required. Head to indiip.com/podcast. That's deep with two I's, indiip.com/podcast, or follow the links in the episode description below. Let's start crushing our habits today. What do you think about the onset of wearables, wearable culture, shall we say? What do you feel about that?
As long as it doesn't become an obsession for you, that would be my thing, and I'm part of that culture. Just FYI. So you don't have to wear our device 24/7, which some people want, others don't want. So there's different things out there. I gotta tell you, Jason, the fact that we can get all this data on glucose, on heart rate, on HRV, blood pressure, that we all have that, right here on our phone with simple wearables, is, I think, a really exciting time to be alive. It's kind of become normal for us because, I walk down the street and almost here in Colorado, somebody, half the people have an Apple Watch, a Garmin watch, a Fitbit, something on their wrist to get it. So it's almost become normalized. But if you think back, 10, 15 years ago, and when I was a college athlete in the 90s, I didn't get any of this information. So I could not connect sleep consistency with, my free throw percentage in basketball, right? I've heard you talk about it. I've had, what 2 beers do to you the next morning, and what that does to your nervous system regulation. So as long as it doesn't become an obsession for you, I think it's a really healthy thing. We can't lose the subjective, but boy, can we benefit from the objective data coming through the wearables we do have. And we need to make sure that those wearables are giving us good data too, which is, again, the case most of the time. But, that's how do we use that? And then, a lot of people have an Apple Watch, but have no idea what the heart rate variability score they get means when they look at that. So there's still a lot of education to do around how to take a metric and implement it to improve your health and reach your goals.
How do you think one should design protocols or habits around these measurements?
It depends on your goals. So if you're an elite athlete, for example, and you're a competitive athlete or whatever competition you see, or you want to win, right? You want to train to win, then you're probably taking, HRV and other things from time to time to check in, hydration, wearing one of the glucose monitors for a while to see what different foods give you. So really to look at it as a competitive advantage, that, hey, and now I see most I try to find a professional athlete who's not tracking heart rate variability in one way or the other. They may be out there, but I would assume they're the vast minority at this point in professional sports than the majority. So I think it gives you insight, which can lead to competitive advantages for you. Now, if you've got somebody that's, I turned 50 this year, so, nobody's asking me to play in the NBA or, to try out for the U.S. track team for the next Olympics, is I use it to how do I live my healthiest life? We were kind of chatting before the show. I'm fortunate enough to live here in Colorado in the United States. I like to take, huge hikes. I love to snowboard. Those are my two big things that I love to do, depending on what the weather is outside. So I want to do that. My goal is to do that when I'm 85, 90, 100 years old. That's a very different set of goals than you may have to win your next competition. So how do I look at these metrics? And again, as some of you've talked about in your podcast, alcohol consumption. I'm old enough to remember when we were told that 2 drinks a day was good for you. Kind of want to go back to that reality. Wine used to be a superfood. Like, always, for your listeners, always make sure you know who's funding the research. That's what I learned through the alcohol studies. So I
think there's a lot of people who still believe that in the UK.
Yes, and we need to nix it. Alcohol, it may not harm you tremendously. It ain't going to help you. Like that's what we know. And so, looking at that, me measuring what my HRV was after 2 drinks the night before and seeing, wow, just after 2 drinks, I see a 20% drop in my HRV. And after 6 drinks, I see a 20% drop 2 days later. It gives you the information. Is the drink worth the hit to my health and performance? And for me, the answer was no, it's not. I enjoy a great whiskey, IPA, give me an Islay Scotch, I enjoy those, but it wasn't really worth it because I could see what the impact was. So for me to live my best life moving forward, that was a life without alcohol, and doing that. So that's just one example of doing that. So looking at your goals and looking at how these biometrics, these wearables support you in helping to find out, for Jason, what works. For Matt, what works. And that's where I love with HRV. We can talk about, in research, we have the N of number. In other words, how many participants were in your study. And for HRV, what's I think so cool is it's an N of 1. Because what works for Jason and his goals and his biology might not be as good for me, with my goals and my biology. So it allows us to find what is the best way for us to live a healthy life with the goals that we want.
I thought probably a good time to give you and also the listeners a bit of context into the sort of like this HRV journey that I've been on the last few weeks. So people who have been listening to the podcast or know me, like I've had a bit of a rough few months of really like poor sleep, or like waking up with chest pains and the kind of classic, thing that is anxiety, but for some reason you just can't shake it, right?
Yeah.
And I've had a Whoop for the last like 3 years or something. I kind of go through phases of being like obsessed, and then I'll maybe come away from it a little bit. And I just started. I can't remember what sort of like took me down this path, but I just thought to myself, I was like, HRV. I'm like, because I think I've not been wearing my Whoop for a while because I got a little bit. I lost confidence in its accuracy. And it's like if you wear it while you're moving around and tracking workouts, it's not really good. So I'm like, okay, so what's the point in wearing it all day? And then and we can get into this and talk about accuracy. So I happened upon, I thought, I actually heard Dr. Andy Galpin. Are you familiar with him?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was talking about HRV, and he referenced your app, Optimal HRV. So I checked that out, and I thought, okay, this is interesting. I'm going to start measuring my HRV manually with my Polar chest
Yeah.
strap. And I started experimenting with what is my HRV like, and I've been doing blood pressure as well. What is
Yeah.
my HRV? What is my blood pressure prior to sleep?
Mm-hmm.
Rather than because a lot of people talk about measuring it in the morning or throughout the
Yeah.
night, but I was like, before I go to bed. And it's interesting where, like we say, you don't want to get too obsessed with it, but I
Right.
feel like in this instance, it was actually kind of the opposite. Me getting obsessed with these numbers actually allowed me to be like, okay, so I just need to do some breathing, some deep breathing,
Yeah.
and and then all of a sudden, and I get that biofeedback.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that. I got the biofeedback to be like, okay, right, yes, I'm down regulating my nervous system, and I
Mm-hmm.
started to see a correlation between resting heart rate, a low resting heart rate, and a high HRV as like a signal that I was ready to go to bed.
I
And
love it.
Obviously HRV has these patterns, and obviously if you've done a hard workout, I tend to train in the evening, so that's not ideal.
Mm-hmm.
So your HRV is not going to be awesome, right, every night.
Right.
But what I've kind of hypothesized to myself was that if I can make sure my HRV is going in the right direction,
Yeah.
when I'm about to sleep, that seems to be like I'm going in the right. Does that make sense?
It does.
So
Absolutely.
even like things like I noticed like my HRV wasn't great, and I couldn't really, and just like I went downstairs and just like tidied some stuff up a little bit, like wandered around the house, and then went back, and then it had improved. And
Yeah.
I heard Andrew Huberman saying a while ago about this benefit of like doing like a bit of a once round your house before you go to sleep. It's like this
I love
primitive
it.
thing of like just checking everything's right, like
Yeah.
it like that's doing something. So I've thrown a lot at you there, but let's discuss. How do you feel about that particular protocol? Yeah, let's go. Let's get nerdy.
Yeah. So, when I first got my first HRV app, and I kind of joke, I was using an app where you could take the accuracy of this usually isn't great, but you could take it on the camera of your phone with the light shining through. It's really cool technology. Its accuracy is difficult to get with it. I literally took so many readings, I burnt my finger. I will have a callus on my right index finger for the rest of my life because of that stupid light and trying to get accurate readings, because most of my readings at the end were like, oh, you got 60% accuracy, which tells you really nothing about your HRV. So it is that I think you give a great example of the N of one, right? Of finding things like I kind of do the same thing is, I kind of, my wife makes me be a very clean person. I really love that about her. Like I wasn't the cleanest person before I married her. Now I am, I try to live up to like 80% of her standards, which means I'm pretty impeccably clean. So according to her, I'm still messy, but for me, my mother is proud of me. Even my closets are halfway organized at this point. So like me walking around doing that check, just picking some things up, locking the door. I have a deadbolt, lock the door. That sort of ritual can be really calming for folks. Now, so figuring out just kind of what works for you, what evening routine. The science behind what I'm going to say next is not something that should get you to go spend, 20, euros or pounds or dollars to buy blue light blocking glasses. But I like them. I think there's a ritual to them, like walking around my house at night. More so, I think it's dimming the lights down and not having bright lights. But, I'll take the placebo effect for $15 for a pair of glasses. So, I put those on like I'm signaling my wind down to that, sleep consistency, going to bed at the same time each night. Those sort of rituals that we create are very regulating for our nervous system, because predictability is a key factor to, a resilient autonomic nervous system. So doing those key things. And you also mentioned the breathing. And this has been where, the HRV biofeedback, as somebody who's never been a good sleeper since I can remember, in like early on in my life, I would wake up at night, I would obsess about whatever, I'd ruminate about whatever. Boy, doing HRV biofeedback before bed, I've gone from a bad sleeper to, I would say, an above average sleeper, because like you said, I get my autonomic nervous system in a state of relaxation, which allows me to fall asleep in a way that before that I was never able to do. Now, I've done a lot of other sleep hygiene things as well, but it's been a real big help for me in my N of one journey.
Yeah, and I was just thinking then as well, and I should add, I don't know if I actually said, but my sleep has really improved.
That's awesome.
Like phenomenally. Like it's been amazing. And like, when you like forget what good sleep feels like, and you wake up and you're like,
that's
like,
it.
This is like how it feels to not be sleep deprived.
Yeah.
I think sleep deprivation, like mild sleep deprivation, is almost so subtle you don't notice it, do you? And you get so used to it, and that's I guess why it can be so dangerous, like to be doing it over time.
Absolutely.
But I think the biofeedback thing on the Optimal HRV app is really incredible. And for people listening, it essentially guides you through. It's like a visual follow along. Inhale for whatever 7, little pause, and then out for 8, whatever it is, and so there's a really cool feature, and I recommend people check out. I will put links to the tool in the show notes as well for people. But what about, how do you feel about? Well, let's talk about the app. Like, how did that come about? Like, what's your like plans? Like, let's talk about Optimal HRV.
Awesome. So the journey, I kind of left it off of, I found my metric, right? I was always like, for mental health, like I was always jealous of, the medical professionals who work with something like diabetes, because they got blood sugar levels, they got glucose levels, right? They could see, was the treatment working or not. Where I left the journey off is I didn't have that metric. I found that metric, but there was a gap there, because when I started my HRV journey 6 years ago, every app out there was for elite athletes. Whoop's a great example, but there's more research to talk about the mental health associations with HRV. And there's a lot of carryover, but just the language around some of the apps weren't appropriate for my mental health setting that I wanted to use it in. One of the things that got me where I just couldn't let HRV go is we saw 3-day significant drops in HRV. There were 2 studies, one showing that could predict self-harm or suicide attempts, the other showing that it could predict relapse. And I was like, if we could get that data to a professional, it might be a 15-minute phone call, might be the difference between a relapse and continued sobriety, or a self-harm event. So one is like, I need to get this data to professionals who are utilizing it, and a lot of coaches utilize this because it gives their clients HRV data as well. And so that was one of the things that I needed, a HIPAA compliant dashboard that didn't really exist at the time. And then the other frustration, Jason, was that people were making up metrics. And there's one thing to make up a metric. I won't name the app itself, but they gave me a productivity score. So I take my morning reading, they give me a productivity score. And I thought that was really cool. And then I started learning about heart rate variability, RMSSD, SDNN, high frequency. And I'm like, I wonder how they configure this, because for the life of me, there was no way I could think about putting these metrics together to get you to predict your productivity for the day.
And just to interject there, it's RMSSD, is it? That's like these are the algorithms.
These are the algorithms that you configure, HRV from. So,
yeah, and different wearables have different algorithms, etc.
Different algorithms.
Yeah.
So I reached out, and this was a similar thing with a couple other apps. Like, how do you get your productivity score? How do you get your readiness score? Because I'm trying to, if I'm going to recommend your platform to a clinician working with somebody who might self-harm, I got to be able to say, this is why you can have confidence, even though if you look in the journal articles, there's no productivity HRV metric. And they said, well, that's proprietary data. I was like, do you have any proof that this predicts productivity or readiness? And they said, no. There's no documented proof that this does. So I also entered a world where I didn't feel very good about recommending algorithms or metrics that you won't tell me how you get them, which leaves a lot of room for, in my opinion, fraud. And two, you don't have any proof that they actually measure what you're labeling them to measure. So the combination of those two things, and the fact that, you have to pay, I don't know what Whoop membership is now, but
£29 a month. I see it every.
Yeah, like at the time it was like $400 US a month. Oura Ring was a big expense. Apple Watch, Garmin. I talked to somebody that actually had a $1,200 US Garmin, watch on. It's like I want to see that thing, because I can't even imagine what that would do. So I wanted this to be accessible to everybody, because here in the US at least, if you could afford an Apple Watch, a Garmin, an Oura Ring, a Whoop membership, you had access to all this data. If you didn't have that level of income, you're being left behind. So there was a health inequity developing, and I'm like, well, I've complained about health inequities in the US my entire career. Maybe this is one that I can come in, and our motto is HRV for everyone. So whether that's like, our memberships go as low as like, $5 US a month. Our readers were still about a third less than polar straps. If you have a polar strap, you don't need our device. That's another thing we do for accessibility. Hey, if you got a device, you don't need to buy our device or another, with that. So we're trying to really get this on everyone. So for a lot of folks, like the professional athletes we work with, they have a Whoop on, but then they use Optimal HRV, kind of like you do as well. It's just like, hey, I want to know what my HRV is now, or I want to do HRV biofeedback. And that's where the accuracy that you get from your polar strap gives you the level of heart rate. We call these RR intervals. And you think about the peak between heartbeats on an EKG, that's what we're measuring, gives you the accuracy that we need to give you really good results as far as your HRV.
And if let's look at some use cases. So let's take the elite athlete, or someone who takes it very seriously, once is interested in the 1%.
Yes.
Which is basically me, but I'm not an elite athlete, but I am interested in the 1%. What do you think? How can we make the best of, and let's say using your app, what would be a good use to get the most out of it?
So morning readings are the first thing. So I threw RMSSD out there. It's really the best metric, and if you like see the algorithm, it is intense. Like, I didn't quite get the math level in school to have any idea what's going on there. I just know that it's been proven over and over to be a really good, the best HRV metric for a normal breathing session. So this is really important for folks, is that as soon as we adjust our breathing rate, it's going to impact our HRV. Now, sometimes we want to do that, but if you want to know your autonomic health, you just want to breathe at a normal rate. So we really encourage, and in the app, we actually have a separate section for morning readings. So somebody like Whoop, I think this is still the case. The last time I heard them talk about it, it was the case. They like take a reading during sleep, which is a fine way to do it. Another way you can do it is when you wake up in the morning, first thing in the morning, you put your puller strap on, or if you have one of our devices or another device, slip that on, take a 3 to 5 minute reading. If you can sit still for 5 minutes, it's kind of the gold standard for these type of readings. But, we're talking about, we only need a few minutes to get really, really good data. And you breathe normally. If you're going to sit up every morning, sit up every morning. It's good to have consistency of time, position. That's why we like people to put it on their phone or alarm clock. So the first thing in the morning, slip that on before you get out of bed. That's going to give you the best accuracy with it. Take that reading. It's going to give you a number. And like I said, we don't mess around with making up metrics. We give you the RMSSD score. And it's kind of like, bowling or golfing against yourself. There are population norms, but they're really almost worthless. They tell you something, but then forget about them, because really you want to improve and increase your scores over time. So research shows, and this is the real great thing about having a device and an app at home, you don't have to go into a laboratory setting to get it. So if you want sort of, again, gold standard of a baseline, take 5 morning readings within a 7-day period. That gives you a good baseline. And then you can measure, hey, I'm going to try a different type of workout today. What's my RMSSD score going to be at the end of the day? Because you can measure it throughout the day as well. But what is it going to be on my next morning baseline? Okay, I'm going to try something like eating within a 8-hour window of time, and then, stop eating for the 16 hours and then eat for 8 hours. How's that going to impact my autonomic nervous system health? I'm going to start a biofeedback or mindfulness practice. How is that impacting my overall autonomic health? And so that morning reading gives you a great metric of overall health over time. So if you're working with me as a therapist or you as a coach or whatever it might be, is we're working with people to see improvements over time in that morning reading score. Then you can take as many readings. We call these anytime readings throughout the day. This is those evening readings, those post-workout readings, pre and post test until your heart's content to kind of get, hey, how are these activities impacting me, with the acknowledgement that if you take it right after a workout, your HRV is probably going to be lower, but you did something healthy for yourself. So that's the thing with HRV, is you put a bunch of physical stress on your system. So it's going to be lower after your workout, but what's your next morning reading look like? And if it was a real hard workout, you might see a dip in that, but then tracking that recovery over time is going to be real key. So with the HRV tracking, that to me is the best practices that morning reading is really going to give you a snapshot of how you're doing today. Then we give like a 7-day average. How are you doing this week? A monthly average. As soon as you go over a month, you want to improve that over time. And then, if you've been taking it for years, like I have, my all-time average, I'm trying to keep around that, because as you age, your HRV naturally decreases over time, like pretty much everything else when you age. Nothing trends in a positive direction. So trying to keep that high as I age and maintain that health. So as far, we can talk about the biofeedback as well, but for the tracking, that's where I really think you get those benefits of HRV.
So a few questions. So morning readings, obviously you want to keep it consistent. Mm-hmm. Is there any benefit to doing like 2 readings and like 2 morning readings, so you get an average of those 2?
I would say if you want accuracy, consistency of position, don't move, because movement, HRV is a very sensitive metric. You kind of mentioned this previously about measuring it while you work out, because you're throwing a ton of artifact in there. And we say about artifact, we're talking about bad data. And this is what keeps me awake at night. My mortal enemy is artifacts. So, if you sit still, you're going to limit artifacts with that. If you do it for 5 minutes, instead of 3, but to go 5 minutes, everything that the research would say is you've got a good reading. So if you sit still, RMSSD will take some of the artifacts out with the algorithm itself, which is why most people rely on RMSSD, except for Apple. For whatever reason, they choose SDN in, but I don't know. If anybody knows anybody at Apple that does HRV, I'd love to talk to them and figure out why they do SDN in. Nobody understands why. But, that's going to take some of that out. But that 5-minute reading is going to be gold for you. Now, if you want to take one after you've got up, done your morning routine, had a cup of coffee or whatever you do, you'll see that it changes in time. So that's where that consistency of that morning reading baseline is going to give you a great snapshot of your autonomic health. Then you can see what coffee does to you, or your tea, or, just getting up and walking around, because it's going to tell you your current state. But if you look at long terms, then you're talking traits, right? So autonomic health is a trait, but how am I doing today is going to, that 5 minutes is going to give you a very research back confidence that you're getting great data for what you're looking for with those.
Yeah, because I think what I've been doing is I've been like sitting up and doing one first thing, and then maybe doing like straight after that in bed doing like 10 minutes yoga nidra. And then usually I'll fall asleep. I'll wake back up, and then I'll record it lying down. So I feel like, given what you're telling me, I should maybe just do the first one.
Do the first one. What I would do is we have that anytime category,
but do it as an
well.
Anytime afterwards.
Go there, tag it daytime instead of morning.
Yeah.
And I would sit up still, because if you sit up in the morning, sit up all the time when you take these, because just lying down versus sitting up is a different, your heart is in a totally different position to the rest of your body. So sit back up and then take anytime reading and see how that differs from that initial morning reading. And so again, it's going to give you good data about how that practice impacts your nervous system health. And, we also know that cortisol spikes in the morning to get our butts out of bed. So you be curious about that result. Just because it may be lower or higher, just kind of see what it is. But your practice could make it higher from your just waking HRV, or, it just may be a little bit later in the morning and you see it a little bit lower because you're having that cortisol hit, which you want to have as you get ready for your day, get out of bed, get ready to do whatever you're going to do. So again, it's a curiosity of how does this practice impact my HRV?
Yeah. I've also been doing like, I've been tracking. The first thing I'll track my perceived readiness, like just how I feel, like a score out of 100. And then I'll do the HRV, and then, cause I'm trying to look for like associations and like how much I am actually recording my Whoop as well. Cause I'm trying to see like how close it is. Yeah. And like trying to make a decision, like whether I stick with Whoop or throw it out, or just stick with it for sleep or something like that.
Yeah.
But one of the things I was wondering, so you said earlier about HRV is the score is all about you. It's not about going, oh, I'm 90, you're 100, let's compete or anything like that. So it's all about you. I think I heard that it's highly genetic in terms of like people with HRV or whatever. But so if we're playing, you against you, trying to improve your HRV, and as you alluded to before, as you get older, that it will start to slope off a little bit.
Yeah.
What can we be aiming for in terms of improvements, and at what point, at what age might we have to adjust our expectations on that growth trajectory? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So for like me, who's been a nerd about this now for years, it was pretty healthy as I've taught others how they can perform well and take care of themselves for like 20 years now, even before I had HRV. I've always been somebody focused on, what sort of thing can I do to improve my health and wellness? So, and I encourage all of your listeners to do this. Sometimes they just become part of our routine. Tomorrow, when you wake up in the morning, just start to count all the good things you do for yourself. Right? Because Jason, I imagine somebody like you, morning, like I gargle, for example, because it activates the vagal nerve, right? It's just part of my routine. I neti pot and then I gargle, right? Mm-hmm. And I don't think it's like brushing my teeth in the morning. I don't think about either of those two things, but every about once a month, I just count all the good things that I do, all the good things in my morning shake that I drink, that I stretch, that I walk the dog and get some of that good blue light of the sun rising over the mountains in the morning, right? So to do that. So one is, if you're going to start a new health habit, in the short term, you can measure that impact on heart rate variability. So you can do that. But then over time, as you take HRV for years, it's, how is my resiliency, my health and wellness staying relatively stable over time? And that becomes really the goal. So for me right now, as somebody who's thinking about, who do I want to be at 95? One, I want to be alive. But two, what do I want my life to be? And for me, I want to be mobile. I want to be enjoying the things I enjoy to whatever level that I can. So I've sort of given up some of the, the high rock stuff that I did when I was younger, because that actually increases my chances of injury at this age, right? I'm worried about, I want to have a killer snowboarding season, next winter. So I'm not going to do too much that's going to put that season at risk. So, I do some legs, but I'm not maxing out on squats or cleans anymore, just because for my health, that's not important. So definitely need some strength training in there. But doing that, I'm grunting a little bit towards the end. I go to failure, but, nobody's going to take a video of me doing curls anymore. And I've replaced running long runs with long walks, because my chance for injury drops dramatically when I do that. And I see my HRV recovery at this age much better for, if I take a 10-mile hike or walk, it's much better the next day than a 10-mile run, and I like them about the same. So that enjoyment is similar. So it's working with your goals, like you mentioned before, that as I get older, my goal is not to show up and dominate a basketball game anymore. It is to be, can I snowboard into my 80s? Can I be taking 5-mile walks in my 90s? Those are my goals now. And so I'm looking for things that promotes that longevity while still doing things that I love to do. Like my ideal day is, spin on the slopes in a powder of the Rockies and just having a blast on my snowboard. So I want to go all out. I want to be able to go in the trees and the bumps and, still step up when I need that performance, but, I don't have to go run a marathon, because it's probably not good for my health to do that at this point in my life. With that. So it's a very functional way to approach health and wellness, and, trying to hold on to that, those RMSSD scores, and keep them high as long as possible.
Oh, and what do we have an indication on what that drop off in terms of like average HRV would look like just with age?
You're probably talking for each decade. And I just want to throw out there, population norms and HRV are tricky things. So whenever I say population norms, the standard deviations are so spread out, because as you talk about genetics and, the health of the individuals involved in the population norm study. So anytime I use that term, just take it with a grain of salt that, this is a struggle with HRV and why we should focus on our own. But when you look at most of the population norm studies, you're going to see, again, and when we talk about RMSSD, we're talking about millisecond differences. You're going to see a couple millisecond drop per decade of life. So it's going to be a gradual increase or decrease over time is going to be natural, pretty much from the age of, 18-ish. If you're an elite athlete in your 20s, you're probably going to maintain very, very high, scores. But, there's just a natural, deterioration of HRV. But we're talking about, if you think about RMSSD as a metric, my population norm right now for 50 is, I think it's like 20, around 23, 24. When I turn 51, I'm going into another decade according to the population norms that we see. So that'll drop down to, I think, 20. So it gives you an idea of we're going to lose 2 to 3 points on our RMSSD per decade, of life. And that's probably regardless of, as my wife says, I'm annoyingly healthy. So, even for me though, like that I'm going to experience that, unless I find some new, health thing out there that I wasn't doing that I can implement, but I don't know what that would be at this time of my life that I'm not doing currently. So
yeah, I'd be I wonder if we could look at like because I imagine there's a lot more data on resting heart rate and how that changes and what is the percentage increase every like 10 years or whatever to kind of give you like that baseline. Because what I'm trying to figure out here, what I'm trying to figure out is like, how do you, like, if you're like benchmarking yourself and trying to improve and you're in your 60s, what can you expect? How much, do you know what I mean? To not get disheartened because it's going down, but like, that's the kind of thing I'm trying to figure out.
If we were talking to like a 21-year-old, theirs would be going down in the same way. So the good news is, let's say like a 70, which is, we have folks in their 70s. I was just talking one from the UK who's all about this stuff the other day, but he's starting to track HRV, he's starting to do HRV biofeedback. So in the short term, if you start a new practice like HRV biofeedback, it's kind of the best hack for your autonomic nervous system health. Now, there's other things as well, things like, eating within a set window, physical activity, sleep consistency. So if a 60, 70, 80-year-old starts taking HRV, just like a 20-year-old, everybody's is gradually going down over time. But we're talking about, like I said, within a decade, you're talking about a 2 to 3 point loss. So you're going from 23 to 21 or 20 in the decade that I'm at the edge of here. So you still have improvement relative to your baseline, regardless of the age you're at. And it decreases at such a slow rate that you got to be somebody like me who has been on the Optimal HRV app from day one, 6 years ago, to even start to really consider, is some of my drops age? So the good news is, you can know that, but if you just start tracking HRV, that's going to be something we can worry about 7-8 years now. Now age might be impacting that slightly. So it's something to worry about or track over time, but not worry about in the short term. Your changes in habits should dramatically impact your HRV way more than aging does.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I alluded to this a little bit earlier, but like tracking it manually, it's quite ritualistic in itself, isn't it?
Yeah.
And rather than it being a passive measure via a wearable that does it through, it's kind of like forcing you to be hyper aware of it. I guess it's like emotions and being self-aware. It's like HRV aware.
Yes.
Yeah, very cool.
Well, and for me too, starting my day out with, I grab it, put it on, open the app up, take my reading first thing in the morning. I start my morning out focusing on my health. Like,
Mm.
and granted, if you're wearing a 24/7 wearable, you can look at the app or whatever as well. There doesn't need to be the physical ritual of putting a device on. But again, it is part of that focus. I think maybe the most powerful thing about measuring HRV is the first thing you think about, or at least what we encourage you to think about, is your health and wellness right from the first thing in the morning. So I think that focus alone, probably helps people live healthier lives. And then you get objective data about habits. And like I said, you get feedback on what 2 beers do to you the next day. And then, you can decide whether or not it's worth it to see those sort of hits to your mind and body.
Is there any correlation with VO2 max?
Yes, and I will give Whoop a lot of credit for this work. So, especially when we look at folks in their athletic span, VO2 max is a good indicator of heart rate variability. So, as a metric, I'd say if you were to rank the top 5 metrics of fitness and physical health, VO2 max would be within at least my top 5 with that. And so, VO2 max, and again, I'll give Whoop credit here for the research that they've done, has demonstrated to improve, be correlated with HRV. I think we can use the word, it's a causational effect that they're interrelated to each other. And when we see improvement in one, we often see, we will, I think, more often than not, see improvement in the other.
Mm. What about biomarkers in general? Like, if you could only pick 4 biomarkers or 5, whatever, like just a handful, like what would they be the big buckets that you would be looking to focus on?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, I'm biased towards heart rate variability, so I'll throw that one on there. I'm very interested, especially with the current kind of health crisis we're in here in the United States, around diabetes and other things. I would just say for the general person, a glucose monitor, would be very informational to somebody, whether they're diabetic or not. I think that's one that I'm really glad has seemed to got out. You don't need a prescription for here in the US. I think if you're relatively healthy, do you need to go to that extreme and pay that amount of money for it? Probably your HRV is telling you a lot of that, but to fine tune it, I think because, my conclusion is we want to avoid diabetes, type 2 diabetes at all cost, as much as possible, just for the consequences that has on people's health. So as a preventative metric, I think that can be, really good. Cortisol levels, though, those are a little harder to track, but I think, HRV and cortisol are the 2, I think, gold standards to measure the stress response. Again, if you have HRV, do you need cortisol draws as well? Not for most people. Like those are gonna be, directly correlated, with each other. But again, it's a very powerful metric of the stress response. I'd probably throw heart rate in there as well, because it is a really important metric. And if it's way off, it probably tells you something about your heart health you need to pay attention to as well. And then I'll use one that for and again, HRV can give you a lot of insight to this, but for those that have trouble sleeping, I think a sleep study kind of system gives you really good tracking. Now, I think, and this is where the wearable market needs to be very, very careful, is, can you get good neurofeedback for $300 off Amazon? Every neurofeedback practitioner I've talked to said, no, it's not worth your money. How much money do you need?
What's this device we're talking about?
I would just say devices. I don't want to throw any specific device under the bus, but when you talk about good neurofeedback, you're talking about thousands of dollars worth of equipment.
Okay, so this is a neural feedback device.
Yeah, so if you're going to change or measure brain waves, for example.
Okay, right.
I think that's really critical, but all the neurofeedback people say, you really need to come into my office and get hooked up to good neurofeedback equipment to get good neurofeedback. So, that could be a really good, but again, it's a very expensive way to do it. And with sleep as well, I think, sleep is a tricky thing to measure. I work with a great sleep company. They send about $20,000 of equipment to your home to adequately trap. Absolute Rest is the company. They do a great job, but that gives you an idea about the type of equipment we need to get really good biometrics on the stages of sleep with that as well. So, I think the sleep metrics are good. Do you want real accurate data, or do you want enough snapshot to give you enough information to say I had a good night's sleep or a bad night's sleep? Because I think that's what, if you don't spend the big money to get the real sensitive equipment, you can still get good sleep, bad sleep kind of thing with that. So yeah, I mean, I think I'd work some of those in, but I think really heart rate variability, heart rate's a good one. If you could get blood pressure in there, I think for, again, depending on your goals and your health conditions, then we start to customize the glucose monitoring, cortisol monitoring per the individual's goal. So the great thing about HRV is that it kind of gives you something that's connected to all these other metrics as one thing to pay attention to. Sometimes the same as a drawback to HRV is it's a metric of overall health. So I don't know if my low HRV score necessarily is the hard workout I did, or the 3 beers I had after the hard workout, or the argument I had with my partner, or work stress. So, separating it out to this causes this is where it sort of has its limitations. That's where things like you're doing to kind of have a subjective check-in as part of it, I think, really comes into play and makes the objective data that much more powerful.
Yeah, I feel like what we're landing on here is that it seems that HRV is correlated with kind of like all of these markers. Yeah. So the question now is there any biomarker, or which of the biomarkers that HRV doesn't correlate with? If you're able to answer that.
That's a great question.
I mean, that's presumably, like LDL cholesterol and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think that's actually, thanks for answering the question, and probably better than what I would come up with. But if you think about long-term health, right, that's going to impact cardiovascular health, and that's going to show up in your HRV as well. So this is where, I mean, kind of what you're trying to measure. If you're trying to measure heart health, definitely take, cholesterol. If you're trying to, treat diabetes, blood sugar, glucose, key for that. So I think the answer to that is when you get granular about stuff, then that's where, like, if you really want great sleep tracking data to see how much time you're spending in REM sleep, how many times you're waking up a night, those are great metrics to have. HRV in the morning is going to tell you how well you slept or not, right? So your sleep consistency practice showing up in your morning, HRV, how recovered are you from the previous day's activities? So I really believe, especially like when I go get my lab results done once a year, those tell me way more than my morning HRV score does. And they're very, very important. Do I need to measure, cholesterol level or glucose levels every day? For me, because of my health status, the answer is that'd be a real waste of money to do that. But to get them done once a year, it helps track. Those biometrics tell me, okay, my eating habits are, helping my HRV, but they're also keeping my cholesterol levels within good ranges as well. My blood pressure, I got a wow the last time somebody took my blood pressure. So I've never had to worry about it. So I don't really couldn't tell you what my score was or what's a good score, what's a bad score, because I never had to think about it. But, it's okay. The nurse said, wow. So don't need to worry about that for another year kind of thing. So it's really think about your own goals and again, if you want to be trying out for the Olympics or win a competition coming up, you may want to bring some of those others in to get more information to support your specific goals. If you want to live a long, healthy life with type 2 diabetes, again, that's a different metric that's going to come in that's going to help you with that. I believe heart rate variability is shown, not because I have an app, but however you measure it, it's a non-invasive, relative, it can be incredibly inexpensive way to just put another biometric into the mix that's measuring overall health and wellness.
And I guess it's a great way to use as a warning signal. Like you say, if you're gonna have your blood's done once a year, but then all of a sudden your HRV tanks for like 4 weeks or something, then it may be an indicator to go get checked out or something.
In fact, I would say 4 days if there's no other explanation.
4 days? That would be a warning signal? Okay.
Yeah, because it's, and when we say significant drops, we're usually talking about 20% to 25% below the norm. Now, if you can say, hey, we've got a big project at work and I'm working 12-hour days, I can tell you why your HRV is lower, right? Yeah. So schedule at least a 3-day weekend, if not a vacation, when that project's done to recover. But if you can't say, and this was one of the interesting things with HRV and COVID, is you could start to see drops in HRV before this COVID symptoms hit. So, heart problems, it could drop. Now, here's the limitation about HRV is that 4-day drop, something going on at work, the onset of heart disease, early warnings for COVID. It's not going to tell you that, but it can give you probably a warning that you might want to reach out, to and say, hey, I'm seeing this. Maybe if COVID's around and it's flu season, taking a COVID test to track out, but starting to eliminate those causes that you see. If you start training for a marathon, that's going to do it as well. So, again, it's not going to give you that specific reason behind the drop, but it can give you, like you said, a great early warning sign of everything ranging from burnout to COVID to heart disease to a mental health crisis, like I mentioned earlier.
Yeah, I suppose that most of us are fairly regular in the things we do. Either we go to the gym 6 days a week, or we don't go to the gym 6 days a week, or we do this, or we follow these patterns, right? And that's going to be useful for finding out what is there's a term for it, isn't it? It's like your normal variance, or like
COVID. It's CVNN is the algorithm, so it's just looking at how much fluctuation
in a typical week you would have. So if your week looks like zigzag like this, and like you say, maybe that's 20%, and then if it drops below that, that's then we go, okay, this is outside of our normal.
Because there seems to be two types of people, and this is what we're learning versus what the research is yet to support. So we hope to be, a part of the research moving forward. Is there just seems to be kind of types of people, and I'm one of those that my week just looks like a gentle rolling hills, like with my morning readings. Like I'm like I said, if I get any healthier, my wife is going to leave me because it would just be annoying at that point. So I can't do a whole lot more to do it and keep my marriage going. Because if I give up one more thing or start one more thing, she's done with me. So I'm just kind of these rolling hills of, I'm above my population norm, not by tremendously amount, but that's my co-founder, Jeff, almost a boring straight line. There'll be things that he sees that can, impact it or not, but he's one of the more consistent. He has less of that variance of day to day. So you get to know yourself. And one of the cool things is about on Wednesdays, I see a dip every week, and you can see some of these different things the stress throughout the week and energy levels throughout the week is I know I kind of start out pretty good on Mondays. I kind of have this dip, and then Thursday or Friday, I start kind of working my way back up, probably thinking about the weekend with that as well. And it's pretty typical now that I've been measuring it for, a long time. And I know my mornings are much more productive, and my HRV is much better than in the morning than my afternoons. Now, I have done a little research hack for your audience here. There was a study done that people that took 1 hour lunch breaks, which I've never done in my life. I'd much rather check out an hour early than take an hour off for lunch. But what they found was that their HRV scores after the lunch break were higher than when they came to work in the morning. So before work was actually higher.
Interesting.
After that hour lunch break. So it's like, okay, I'm going to try this out. And yeah, lo and behold, my afternoons, not just like I trade an hour of productivity for an hour, but I'm just much better until 4 or 5 o'clock than I ever was.
They must have been eating
break.
a good lunch. Some of the things that people eat at lunchtime over here, I feel like the heart rate variability wouldn't be very good.
But the study wasn't. I totally agree with you 100%. But the study did not, as far as I remember, take into account what they ate for lunch, because a lot of these people were just eating, stuffing their face while they were doing emails and working. So they didn't change.
I suppose, because if you're comparing someone who's eating and working versus eating and resting, okay.
Yeah, so it was just looked at. I don't think they changed what they were eating at all. They just saw this huge spike after that break. I encourage people that's where you hang out with your coworkers. You talk about your kids' football games, or the hot date you had last night, or what you're binging on Netflix, or whatever you're doing. Like, have that social connection. If you can go for a walk as part of that hour, do that. Obviously, I have my thoughts on what you should be eating for lunch, but to improve your HRV as well. But those are the little things you can test out, because for Jason, it may work great. For Matt, not so much, but you can really measure that out. And for me, I saw the research. I was right there with the research, and I've got that extra 2 hours, I would say, for that hour. And usually I'm like walking by the river I have close to my house with an audiobook or a podcast on that's somewhat work related. So I'm still learning, but that for me is a joy and pleasure, because I'll do that on my free time as well. So trying to find something that works for you. Maybe it's a workout for you, get a workout in on the lunch hour, seeing how that impacts your productivity and your HRV throughout the afternoon.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's talk about, while we're on that subject matter, what are your top protocols for increasing HRV?
All right, so number one, and some researchers that use our app get mad at us for doing this, but we have the best way, in my opinion, for the typical person. So baseline of health, the best way to improve your HRV is also in the app as well. And that's HRV Biofeedback. So this is where a lot of, like I said, professional athletes or special forces military, they'll have Whoop or a Ring. Some of them have all these devices on them. Like I've actually seen somebody with a Garmin watch, a Whoop strap, and an Oura Ring all at once, and I'm like,
I've had a Whoop, I've had a Coros, and I've had a Polar.
I mean, I'm like, how do you have time to look at all that data? And I want to talk to you and see what are you learning anything, or are you just confused? Like, I don't know, but
the latter.
So a lot of the elite performers, that they will use the HRV in our app, the HRV biofeedback aspect. Now, some of them get addicted to taking, on-demand HRV and liking the accuracy they get from our system. But this is where resonance frequency breathing comes in. And if I can go down this rabbit hole, I think it'll be worth the journey for your listeners, is that we all have an ideal breathing rate. So I highly encourage everybody to go back. If you haven't heard Jason's episode on breath work, go do that. I think that was like one that I was like, I need to figure out what Jason is doing with this podcast. And then that one is like, oh, I'm learning stuff. This is great stuff that you're getting with that episode. So we all have an ideal breathing rate for nervous system regulation. So if you want to strengthen that ventral vagal brake, and again, that's that brake in chart that's going to really influence HRV. So it's going to be a huge influence on physical, social, emotional health, and cognitive functioning. So we all have an ideal breathing rate that will train that vagal brake. So it's like taking your parasympathetic vagal nerve to the gym, and we need to think about it that way. And you can do this with, you can go to a biofeedback practitioner in your community. They can do this in office, but we offer it in the app as well. Is you breathe from 7 breaths per minute down to 3.5 breaths per minute. And what we're looking for as you do that assessment is what peaks your heart rate variability. So most of the research says that we're seeing things that may contradict this. So take this with a caveat, is once you're over about the age of 17 or 18, your resonance frequency rate doesn't change. We're seeing, the only thing that the research would support me saying 100% is height has an influence on your resonance frequency breathing rate. I'm 6'7", so mine is 4.5, which is fairly low. The average is around 6 breaths per minute. And when you listen to breath work people, when they talk about, oh, what breathing rate should you do? Most of them will say 6 breaths per minute. But if a 4.5 person like me is breathing at 6 breaths per minute, I'm missing some of the benefit of that breath work.
Yeah, I did the test. Yeah. So I did the test, and you have the different rates, and it measures which is best for you. And I think mine was whatever the longest. I think it's 6.5 or something like that.
Yeah,
I think that's the one I got.
Oh, so you guys, and then that is just genetics. Now we might be seeing something, because this is where I don't have research. I'm very clear when the research doesn't support the on the ground reality that I'm seeing. Is we do a lot of work with special forces in the military. And what professional biofeedback practitioners who are using $10,000, $15,000 equipment to measure resonance frequency breathing are telling us is that with normal heighted people that have a lot of body mass, they're seeing 3.5 breaths per minute. We didn't even offer that to begin with, because research doesn't support that low of resonance frequency breathing. But this is multiple people that are performance coaches with, some of the best performers in the entire world are saying, you got to offer 3.5 breaths per minute. And we're like, show us the research. And they're sending us they're not telling us who gets these, but they're sending us their biofeedback results that they're getting from resonance frequency breathing. So maybe there's more than just height influencing it. I always encourage, if you're new to pace breathing, retake the assessment in 6 weeks. It takes about 16, 17 minutes to go through the assessment. So once you get the skill of pace breathing, it's just worth doing it again, checking it out. So you get this ideal breathing rate, then you put that into the app. So I breathe at my resonance frequency breathing rate. You can get comfortable with this from, you can have like a 1 second pause. I think the pause goes up to 2.5 seconds between breaths. We kind of defaulted to 0.5 just to have that transition. But, so you can get comfortable with that to an extent with that. I like the extended exhale. Your breath work podcast did a great job of talking about that oxygen carbon dioxide exchange. And so a little bit longer of an exhale, we're taking advantage of that, that carbon dioxide CO2 pH level balance that we're shooting for in our breath work. But it really peaks what we call low frequency HRV. So when we're breathing at normal rate, RMSSD for that 3 to 5 minute reading is ideal. But when we're doing breath work, we want to peak low frequency. That's our training rate. To be very, very clear, you don't want to go around all day breathing at resonance frequency. It's like if you want huge biceps, curling 24/7
Yeah.
is not going to help you reach your goal, right? You don't want to do that. So think about your HRV training is the exact same way. So, doing and everything with the breath work, the only thing I would really add to that conversation would be, knowing your resonance frequency and bringing in HRV and then getting the biofeedback like we give you to say, how much time in the last minute have you been in low frequency? So how much of your last minute have you been really in that optimal, we call optimal zone, that low frequency zone that we know is going to improve all aspects of health. It's just going to add that data, to your breathing work. And again, you get all the benefits of mindfulness. You get all the benefits of, I've started to use a polar strap and do my Tai Chi practice with, tracking low frequency. Cause I want to get it there too. I'm moving, so it's a little harder, but breathing and really focused on positioning really helps, bring that science even into a movement practice. Now I can't be jumping rope and doing it because that's way too much movement, but slow intentional movements, I find I can keep myself for the most part in low frequency as well. So if you want to know the best way to improve your HRV, again, not knowing any of your habits in life, the easy answer is incorporating heart rate variability, breath work into your daily practice. We come back to that, but let me just throw some of the other basics out there. Movement. And when we talk about movement for HRV, if you want to run a marathon, God bless you. But we're talking about zone 2 has been especially effective. And that zone 2 is walking at a pace where, you can maintain a normal rate of conversation. So,
I'll run
biking.
in.
Yes.
Yeah.
I heard you you were doing a competition with all nasal breathing,
Yeah.
which impressed the heck out of me. That because I run when I was jogging, when I'm doing mountain climbing, hiking, climbing steep, I always try to breathe through my nose like you do to keep that zone 2. So zone 2 movement, if you want to do more than that, great. Strength training, working all the major muscle groups once a week. Sleep. It's probably the biggest impactor of your morning reading is the quality of sleep because it's so important to recovery. And then nutrition as well. Avoiding anti-inflammatory foods, highly ultra processed foods, those things as well. And then healthy breathing. I've added that one to my 3. So you've got movement, exercise, you got movement, you got nutrition, you got sleep, and then you got healthy breathing. Throw in HRV, biofeedback, mindfulness, whatever sort of your breath work mindfulness practice is, and you've got really solid base for health. As measured through your autonomic nervous system, which controls 80% of your body's functioning. So that you're maximizing that 80% of your body's overall health and wellness.
Yeah, I suppose it becomes, the question is basically, what are the best things to improve your health?
Yeah.
and it's
kind of
really all the stuff we know, but plus HRV and breathwork probably.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And avoid things for your audience too, overtraining. I was, in the old school where if you didn't throw up at the end of your workout, you didn't work hard enough. You better about ready to pass out or you need to go run more stairs kind of mentality. I'm so jealous of athletes nowadays who can look at their morning HRV score and kind of think about, okay, how I'm low today. So how do I still do an active recovery? But how do I do what I need to do to work out? Maybe it's more of a strength workout on a low HRV day is your good recovery. But hey, maybe today is not the day that I got to push it to the max today. And I would have been much better in games if I would have paid attention to recovery, as much as pushing myself to the point of passing out every time I worked out.
Yeah, and you can do we talk about zone 2 running.
Yep.
You can kind of do like, it's not literal zone 2, but you can kind of do like the equivalent in the gym strength training. Like,
Yep.
just don't go, keep 5 reps in reserve, or don't, just
Yep.
keep it movement based. And those things can actually, I would imagine, probably definitely improve how you feel, but not like take
Yep.
you too close.
Right. So you're not risking injury. You're not illness, which we know that if you overtrain, that's what's awaiting. That's the consequence for you. So it helps you to minimize that. While we know injuries, illnesses will happen to all of us, unfortunately, you're mitigating a lot of that, and you're showing up to your performance. With peak cognitive, emotional, which for a lot of sports, I had to play basketball, so run and run and run and run. Then I had to shoot a free throw.
Yeah.
That's a very different state to be in than running back to play defense. Like, so, you can make those state changes better. You can bring in relaxation if your sport requires it as part of your between your crazy activities that you do and your sport. Like, what's in between? Can you do a little resonance frequency breathing between activities to promote recovery, just like you're taking maybe some electrolytes in or other things to help with recovery, so you can perform at your best for the next insane activity that you're going to participate in.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, I got mixed up with that resonancy breathing thing. It's 3.5.
Okay, I figured you were down in that direction.
Yeah.
So,
I think maybe I was
you're
thinking
one of those people that would prove what we're seeing on the ground of being ultra fit the way you are. Yours is lower. Like, again, science does not allow me to make that statement.
But that's the pattern that you're seeing. Yeah.
Does. Because we used to say, when we first started this, science said 6.5 breaths per minute to 4.5 breaths per minute. And the difference between 4.5 and 3.5 is really great. I mean, that's significant breathing differences. So again, it allows you to bring that into, the breath work that you're doing and to support, whatever, again, the goals are of your breath work, your mindfulness practice, your relaxation practice with that.
So can you get any lower than that on the app, or is that the lowest one?
That is the lowest that we go. Now, there's been 2 people that want us to go even lower than that. I mean, I just don't know. Like, I want you to take it over again. If you're like pushing, make sure, like, because we may go lower. I haven't, where we sort of track is we've got these trained biofeedback experts in their office watching somebody breathe, right? So there's no artifact. Their fancy machine works out all. They can see it. The lowest they've asked us to go down, which we didn't feel comfortable with necessarily initially, is 3.5. But
and why don't you feel comfortable with it? Is it because it's potentially dangerous? Because
there's no science to support that it should go lower than that. Now,
okay.
we've not gotten any of the experts finding that it's those peak performers we work with go any lower than that. And lower is not better, again, with caveats of what we're seeing here overall. So, you talk to me a year from now, we may go down. You can opt out around 4 breaths per minute if you feel uncomfortable. So, but I know a lot of our people who probably 6.5, and they're going to breathe because they think 3.5 is better because Jason has 3.5, so I want 3.5. Man, and here's the real test for somebody like you is, does that 3.5 allow you to get to optimal zone and kind of stay there throughout your practice at a 50 to 60% clip initially where you're at in your journey? That's what we're looking for, right? So there's no competition for scores, with this. So
yeah, but if people do want to download your app and do a free trial and tell us your score.
Hey, if I've got everybody who's listening to this tells me 3.5, I mean, you can hack it and do 3. I mean, it's not too hard to figure out the breathing rate for 3 breaths per minute, and cheap. It's got to be relatively comfortable. But, that was what I thought was interesting with your Wim Hof conversation and your breath works. I have never found anything in the research that hyperventilating is good for you in any way, shape, or form. So we do not want people to be hyperventilating. If it feels a little uncomfortable at first, I'm okay with that. Like, can you get an optimal zone? Because it is a skill you build over time, which is why we encourage people. And I think we're going to be more encouraging. Like, let's say you go from your intense athletic set to a more like my athletic set it goes from performance to longevity focus.
Yeah.
So you're doing more zone 2, less of your frog squats with God knows how much weight on, or whatever the heck you all do, is you may see a change in your resonance frequency breathing, which again, research does not support that statement, but I think that that's what the top researchers are thinking is happening. So you might want to take it once a year just to see any adjustments that you can have in that. But, hey, give us a whole. We didn't have 3.5 in there to begin with, so we are directed by our users' feedback. So yeah, if we get enough of it, you'll probably see a change in the app, because we're always trying to match reality on the ground with research that's out there. So we don't want to go too far away from the research. But at the same time, if a bunch of biofeedback practitioners are saying 3.5 and you're getting 3.5 and many of our users are getting 3.5, hey, if we're starting to hear 3, we'll look at the data and see if it does make sense to go down that low. Well, it should not be a competition for anybody. So
yeah. Last point on this. So if you're doing the biofeedback, should you be getting a immediate improvement in your HRV when you go and test it, or is that not necessarily the case?
Depending on how hard you're working initially. So the answer to that question is, if you do a RMSSD before your biofeedback and RMSSD after your biofeedback, you should over time see improvement for that. Now, if you're brand new to the app and you're new to paced breathing and you're new to resonance frequency breathing, you're training, right? So there is exertion to getting into low and staying in low frequency. Right now, my hack for low frequency is an exhale that I don't even know what I'm doing right now. I think it's called lion's breath in yoga, but it's like I'm rattling my neck, and I think what I'm doing is I'm activating my vagal nerve on my exhale, and I do it pretty powerfully. It's kind of exhausting to do for 20 minutes, I'll be honest with you, but I see my low frequency stay higher with this breath. Now, if I wasn't getting immediate biofeedback on this, I would have never discovered this. Like, I know humming is supposed to improve, but humming doesn't do it for me. It's this weird growling noise. My wife thinks I've lost my mind when she walks in the room. But like, it keeps me in the optimal zone or high-low frequency during my practice. But I'm kind of tired after I do it. So mine might be initially a little bit lower. Now, as I'm getting used to this type of breathing, then I'm getting the benefits of that because I've been in high, low frequency. So when I go back to normal breathing, I do see that boost there. And the interesting thing about being in low frequency is that it's a nice, relaxing state to be in, but we know that it preps you for performance as well. So it's fascinating. That's the same thing that allows me to give, my performances nowadays are, I do want to go like do moguls on a snowboard really well, but nobody's watching. Like, that's just my enjoyment to do that. So I give presentations a lot in the work that I do. So I want to show up and give a great presentation. So if I can be behind stage or, have a little bit of time, I'll do resonance frequency breathing to get in a good state to deliver my presentation. But the same tool that I use also has improved my sleep dramatically since I've been doing that. I do it about, around a hour to a half hour before I go to sleep. And my time to sleep has just decreased dramatically. So that's the kind of maybe unintuitive thing is it prepares you autonomically to perform at a high level, but also at the end of the day to be in a good state then to fall asleep as well. So it's a very universal, tool for both stress regulation, sleep preparation, but also performance as well.
Yeah, it's like there's a bit of a probably quite similar to, for example, like low heart rate pre-sleep and low heart rate like before you go into do a competition is probably pretty good, as long as you're actually as long as you're kind of aroused to a certain point, not just like sleepy, right? It's that kind of beautiful paradox, isn't there, between this kind of like you're ready but you're chill.
And an ideal state, again, back when I was a stupid athlete who nobody was talking about this stuff, like back in the day when Mountain Dew was your Monster energy drink or your Red Bull, I shotgun 2 of those before a basketball game. Why? Like, I should have been, like, I just wonder what a different type of teammate performance I would have if I was, autonomically regulated. I would have been up because anybody watches me do anything, I'm going to get excited about it. Like, I would have been up regardless, but I would also have been regulated and my heart rate wouldn't have been off the chart because I just almost overdosed from caffeine. I didn't need to do that, right? So again, you can look at that your pre-game, pre-competition, routine and working in resonance frequency breathing can be a real big thing because, if you need help getting up for a performance, maybe caffeine or, I know some people even do like nicotine gum. I'm not saying that's a bad thing for everybody to do, but it shouldn't be how you like pre-game by down in 2 high sugar, high caffeinated beverages. Like,
Yeah, I'm not sure about the nicotine thing because I know it's a nootropic, but it's a vasoconstrictor, isn't it?
There are a lot of people that I'm coming across in my work that use nicotine like people use caffeine. I am not recommending either of those 2 substances. So just to be very, 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 very clear with this, but I know a lot of peak, whether it's cognitive, mostly cognitive. I'm a lot in the coder world now and the hackers. Nicotine is one of those hacks that they do to give energy short term. Please here. Not recommending it at all. But, I know people use those substances like caffeine to get a energy boost in order to perform better. Should they be doing it? Probably not. If you can get there naturally into that state, that's great. Because after a basketball game, I probably didn't go to sleep until like 2 a.m. And that was a mixture between the excitement of the game, but also I was high off my mind on caffeine at the time too. Like, I was doing those smelling salts, just stupid stuff like that I look back on. And, at the time I thought was improving performance. In hindsight, I would have been much better off with some good focused breathing, because I was going to be up anyway for the game. So,
yeah. Cool. If you listen to the podcast, you probably know I like to finish with 5 habits. What are your daily 5 habits? I feel like maybe we know some of them anyways because we've kind of gone through some of this, but would they be any different? And if not, what are they?
Yeah, so So we already mentioned, and this, your breathwork podcast did this. So this will be I won't include this on mine because I got plenty to give you. The 20 minutes of breath work, I would say if you're going to bring in HRV, why not see if your breath work is having the training effects you want it to do? So, you kind of went back and forth about how much time. If you can work yourself up to 20 minutes a day, even if you split that into 2 10 minutes or 3 7 minutes, trying to get that up there. So I just wanted to add that to your conversation with this. So mine, God, which ones do I want to choose? So I'll do the early morning natural light. I don't stare at the sun because I already can't see anymore, really. So I'm not going to sit there and stare directly at the sun, but I'm going to get those early morning protons coming into the sun to set my circadian rhythm. That's going to be a key one. I have a dog, so the dog needs walk. So I've crafted my life where I'm a few blocks from beautiful nature, so I get time out in nature. I get the sunrise signals to my circadian rhythm to kick in. So my morning dog walk, I get physical activity in the morning, nature in the morning, all before my breathing and all that practice in the morning. So that would be one. I guess a newer one, I have a standing desk and I have a treadmill and I put on a weighted vest and do some rucking while I work.
Interesting.
I get my rucking in.
I like it.
Yeah, so I don't look as weird walking around my community with the weighted vest. I still do that from time to time. And when I hike, I usually have a pack as well. So I'll do a little rucking. That's been a new habit that I really like, as well as the walking. And I find that helps with my focus as well with that piece of things. I do eat within about a 6-hour window through the day. I always try to have my last calorie before 7 o'clock and or sunset. So depending on the time of year that is, that can vary, but so my eating habits are, I restrict that window down, and to do that in a healthy way. I think another great habit with sleep is sleep consistency. I love how the sleep experts are talking about sleep lag like they are jet lag now. So if you throw off that consistency by more than an hour either way, you're not going to be performing at your best. Even if you oversleep, you're going to be groggy. It'll probably show up in your HRV as well. And the final one, I think I got one more left, is I love tapping. I'll give, if you're watching the video, I'll give this to you, is I like to tap and I cross my arms here for the listeners, because we know with tapping from a psychological perspective, if I cross over the right-left brain, so I'm crossing my arms here when I do this, I start to tap on my forehead and I work down in kind of a set of figure eights all the way down to right under my lips and then back up. This we know with tapping is that if I'm feeling an emotion,
it's hard to do it with the microphone in front of me.
Yeah, so now if you go kind of figure eights around your eyes, then down under your nose, then down under your lips. These are all really good acupuncture points as well. That is going to, if you do that at the end of your practice, the really good feeling you have in your practice kind of gets ingrained. If you do any gratitude practice, it kind of helps bring that and makes that emotion, that calm, that autonomic state we're shooting for with HRV biofeedback, it sticks with you longer. Really cool science behind this as well. This isn't anything, maybe the acupuncture points, but like this one's really good for the brain. So
I felt, that one felt like really, that one felt like more salient, if you will.
Yeah, so right under the nose is a really good one. But there's different, we do tapping and trauma work, and this is hitting some of the key. If you got a beard, you can kind of give a little bit more of a smack right there on the side of your face. I just find it as a great energy shot as well. So that's a habit I'll share. That that the tapping. You can also just tap. I've got my arms crossed here. If you think about King Tut on the Egyptian tombs, where the arms are crossed across the chest, you can just tap on your shoulders, gain a lot of that same benefits. Under the shoulders is another great place to tap as well. So another little nerdy science on autonomic regulation there you can incorporate really easy into your day. So if you need an energy boost, just tapping kind of a little bit harder right under your shoulders and that King Tut piece. I love how that just kind of feels afterwards, kind of loosens you up. Really great little refresher you can do throughout your day as well.
Very nice. Thank you for that. All right. Well, before we bring this to a close, do you want to tell us, have you got any plans, anything coming up, anything on the app or something that we can look out for?
Yeah. So the real, I kind of exhale because a lot of this is we're a shoestring funded company. If you don't know what that means, it means, if we're going to do anything in the app, the founders write a check in order for that thing to happen. So, we're kind of in that startup seed stage. So you'll see constant improvements in the apps. We're working on onboarding. We got a lot of people taking the 30-day trial. We need to make them HRV experts right away. We're hoping to give some really good summaries coming up where, hey, I want to know what my best RMSSD score was this month. And so we'll give you the date of when your best week was, when your best month was. If some of these opportunities, hopefully, that we're looking at, I'd love to get, AI integrated into this. I think every company that is a startup in any way says, oh, we got an HI or an AI pitch. We collect so much data. Even just like your 5-minute reading, you would be blown away by what the data we collect. Now it's all your heart rate, but it's so much data. And the algorithm itself is complex enough to run. Mm-hmm. But with, AI, I think we can start to look at what's the relationship between your RMSSD and your high frequency HRV? And does that tell us anything new that maybe RMSSD alone doesn't tell? I would love to generate a health coach, but do it in a good way. Every AI chat bot most that I work with, they may answer the first question right, but then I'm asking for customer service pretty soon right after that. So really trying to do assessments and personalized, reflections for what are your goals. What do you want to, because your goals are, again, as we've talked about, your goals are really different than my goals. So my strategies and my HRV needs to be looked at in a very different way than yours are. Now, there's going to be a lot of overlap there. The HRV science is going to be the same, but I'm really hoping that we can look at getting the AI, a real AI coach into the app in the near future. I think every day we don't do it, it becomes half as expensive to do. So,
yeah.
If you play around with ChatGPT's agent mode, I think they did something there that now that's there. We would have had to pay $1 million to have that developed 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. So, now it's rolled out in my $20 a month subscription because AI will give you a really good HRV, tell you what to do, but it'll tell you the same thing the next day. And if it's bad, it'll tell you the same thing every time it's bad. So you really need that personalization, and pretty intense personalization to get the most out of it. So that's sort of my dream to get that in, because everybody I hear that's trying other people's AI coaches are not thrilled with the feedback they're getting. So I want to be a good one in that way, and not just throw AI into our app to say we have AI in our app. So
that's cool.
That's not how I roll. So it's got to have a meaningful impact. So those are some of the things on the horizon. I talked about the limitations of doing a finger reader, but like for people that just want to test it out, they don't have a puller strap or other device, it gives you a way to test out the functionalities, even though accuracy may not be great. I think the future of HRV probably lies in facial readings as well. There's some really cool work being done, not really around HRV, though it measures it, but how they're measuring it. You can't get HRV really within 1 minute. You need at least 3 minutes, if not 5. So, but that would allow us to bring other biometrics into. So if anybody's out there that, send on some money and you're looking for a fun investment, where we hope to, really change the face of HRV in the next stages of our development with some of this stuff.
Matt, where should people find you if they want to find out more about what you do in your work?
Yeah, so optimalhrv.com is a great place. And then you can put Matt at optimalhrv.com is my email address. So if nothing comes out of this conversation, I think we covered a lot of really good deep ground here, but I love talking about this stuff. So, don't hesitate to reach out to me. If we're not the right solution for you, I'm happy to suggest those that might be depending on your goals. But I love talking about HRV. I've been doing this now for probably about 7 years. And, sometimes the slow pace of tech development can get a little frustrating, but talking to people that are really passionate about their health and performance is always a fun conversation to have. So don't hesitate to reach out to me.
Yeah, and I think as well, for anyone who's curious about the app, like when you look at it compared to other apps, it probably doesn't have as many like dashboard things as what they're used to. But one of the things that I like about it is everything has there's more like sustenance there, if that makes sense. And I think a lot of these apps can, they have all these features, and like you say, you just you don't know what to do with them all. There's so much. So it's very cost effective, and I really love it. So thank you for bringing this product out, and I'm sure that people are going to love it. So thank you.
Awesome. If you're a nerd, we're your home. Like I said, we give you RMSSD, we give you low frequency. We're not going to put labels we can't support with the research. Like I said, if enough people tell us we can go down to 3.5, we'll go down to 3.5. But we give, because we know that our users, will know what we're talking about. And with watching some of our onboarding videos, if you don't know, we're going to teach you very quickly about how to look at your scores and how to use those to really guide your health journey.
Awesome. This has been so good. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your time.
Jason. It's been so much fun.
Yeah, and I will have a great day, and I'll look forward to speaking to you soon.
Awesome.
Hey guys, it's me. Just a quick one before you get going. Thank you so much for making it all the way to the end. I really appreciate it. Don't forget, you can check out links to my guests via the episode description below. And a reminder to claim your free VIP pass month at Indiip. Go to indiip.com/podcast. That's indiip.com/podcast. If you're looking to improve your life and build habits, I really think you're going to love this tool. All links are in the episode description. Thanks for watching, and I'll look forward to seeing you in the next one.